My name is Daniel James Sharp. I'm the editor of the Freethinker. Today I'm talking to the journalist and author James Bloodworth about his new book, Lost Boys, A Personal Journey Through the Manosphere. So first of all, thank you very much for talking to me today, James.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
and I think the first thing I'd like to ask about is, well, there have been lots of different kinds of manosphere over the past couple of decades, and you speak about the evolution of it over the past couple of decades, from pickup artists and incels to red, black, and blue pillars, status maxers and the like. Um, all very strange language, I imagine, to a lot of people. Um, but yeah, could you give a brief overview of all of this, of the development and what we might call the tendencies of the manosphere?
Sure. Excuse me. Frog in my throat. Sure. So the manosphere, I mean, many people would associate the manosphere with someone like Andrew Tate, a notorious influencer. But the manosphere is kind of it goes back several decades, 40 years and or more even. Kind of started off in a recognizable form in the 70s. And what the manosphere is, makes sense to kind of spell out what it is. It's a bunch of anti-feminist subcultures or male supremacist subcultures that really took off with the internet, but they exist offline as well. They have as much as a distinction still exists between offline and online, they run programs in real life, from teaching men how to pick up women in bars and nightclubs to political conferences, to just courses and they're masculinity entrepreneurs. Really, it's an industry, as well as kind of a subculture, and it's based around the idea that uh, men are really the ones who are oppressed by women, and basically it's pickup artists were in some ways a response to the sexual revolution, and from the relatively benign, from men learning how to given some kind of openers, conversational starters, this kind of thing. But underlying a lot of it was this very there was a political edge to it, which said that women are in control now, so men need to develop their own strategies to kind of wrestle control back and manipulate women in the bedroom. Uh, and then it gets more political. Different aspects of the manosphere. So the so-called red pill is this idea that is much more political, much more conspiratorial. Again, it rests on the idea that women are in charge rather than men, and that men need to wrestle back political control, control in the home. Men need to dominate women again, essentially. Um, and then you also have the incels, involuntary celibates, who make an identity out of. They're basically male separatists. They make an identity around like not being able to find a partner. Again, going back to the fact that in their eyes, since the sexual revolution, women are all pursuing high status alpha males. It's a very social Darwinian view of human affairs and women in general. Uh, there were these restrictions on female sexuality up until, but they would say like the sexual revolution, but kind of they start to break down. In the 50s is seen as this stuffy era. Really, those things start to break down even before then. But they would kind of hark back to traditional values and say that since women have been given freedom to basically date who they want, or choose who they want to date, choose to work or not, society's kind of fallen to pieces. That's their view. They locate it at the feet of women. The fact that some men are struggling now.
So, I mean, yeah, as you say, there's a lot of different versions of the manosphere. So, I mean,
There are a lot of branches. Yeah, there are a lot
yeah,
of branches.
I was wondering though, if given that, does it make sense to talk of a manosphere singular as opposed to plural? You know, is there a single definition that sort of encompasses all of these different branches, or are they too different to really um, bunch together?
Good question. Good question. And I think the reason I think it's the reason I've kind of grouped them together under that umbrella term, and the reason why they sometimes are, or at least the reason I do it, is because so the pickup artists kind of spawned some of the other Manosphere communities. That you can kind of trace them back. You can trace the incel movement as a reaction against uh, pickup entrepreneurs, seduction entrepreneurs. So in 2005, the journalist for Rolling Stone, Neil Strauss, released a book called The Game. It was an undercover kind of, not really an investigation, but it was an undercover kind of gonzo story of his immersion in the seduction community in Hollywood. Um, he published it. It was hugely popular, sold 2 million copies, New York Times bestseller, and it spawned this kind of industry of all of these other dating gurus purporting to kind of masculinity entrepreneurs purporting to teach men how to pick up women. A lot of scammers, a lot of hucksterism, and the incel movement emerged as kind of a backlash against that. But they still kept all of the misogynistic attitudes towards women. So the pickup artists were, yeah, they trucked in everything from just scripted openers in conversation starters, relatively benign stuff, advice on what aftershave to wear, advice on how to dress, or how to become more charismatic or funny or whatever. But there was underlying it all, there was this ideology of men are like this, women are like this, very kind of reductive view, drew a lot on a very kind of bastardized view of evolutionary psychology, a lot of just so stories, a lot of the idea that if you follow scripts when you're in conversation with a woman, it will result in this. A certain way of seeing human interactions, and that's shared by all of the incel community. While it was anti self-help, anti pickup artist, anti self-improvement, because they believed that it was all determined by genetics and how you looked and your bone structure and how tall you were. They still retained the same view of men and women and gender relations. The red pill is another branch of the manosphere which emerged from the pickup artist scene. Is more political. But it directly emerged. It basically was a much more political, but more heavy on the kind of political activism as opposed to kind of the pickup lines. And similarly with men going their own way, again, another group of male separatists who think that men need to, remove themselves from. I mean, some of it's not necessarily voluntary on their part, remove themselves from interactions with women, um, but they kind of think that the women are the source of their problems. And men's rights activists, again, it's a more political variant, but I think it's useful because it to unite them because they are kind of united by the view of that men's problems are like things started to go wrong for men when because of feminism. That's how I would unite them, and also that link of many of the groups to the original pickup artists who were about kind of taking back control of in the dating market, quote unquote, as they would call it. And then the other stuff kind of came a bit later on, when people didn't think that was enough. Some people thought, no, you need to actually get involved in politics and advocate for like really turning back the clock, and returning to traditional gender roles and whatnot.
Yeah. No, I think market is a really important word, and you discuss it in the book. Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't use that word myself, but as to kind of they
I,
use the word. They use the word, yeah.
yeah, but in the sense of one of the reasons behind the rise of the manosphere is the marketization of life in general,
Yeah.
uh, with on social media, Tinder and Grinder and all the rest of it. Um, but I guess it does seem like from what you described there, like a lot of it seems, or perhaps once was, slightly innocuous. It was uh, here's some advice on how to pick up women. And I can, it sounds like a conversation people might have with their friends down the pub. Here's how to, find a nice woman, or alternately, here's how to find a nice man. Um, so it seems like it's a bit of a story of radicalization as well.
Yeah,
It's to go
definitely.
from this sort of advice and this um, you know very normal desire to find a partner, um, but then you get from that to people like Andrew Tate. It's quite a story, and yeah,
Definitely, definitely. And that's the thing. There was, I mean, and certainly a lot of the like myself, I got drawn into the pickup artist scene like very briefly in 2005, 6 that time. So I attended a pickup artist boot camp in London, and I tell that story in the book. You know, it's kind of what I'm not embarrassed. I wouldn't say I'm embarrassed about it now because I've written about it, but it was kind of something. It was showing how I could get drawn into that. I'm not kind of standing here presenting myself as a guru who has it all figured out. Like I was drawn into that world to some extent. But the thing is, yeah, the difference between someone just giving, some regular advice or helpful advice is it's a business. It was a business. These figures present themselves as like gurus. And it isn't just like it doesn't just end at just some kind of advice like go out more. It's not just self-improvement. It comes with this whole ideology of which starts off with giving someone some scripted lines, observational humor at a bar or something, which is that can be useful just so you have something to pull out of the can, as it were, when you meet when you want to go talk to someone, but nothing comes to mind. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that at all. Um, but then there was also it was packaged within this whole kind of worldview where um, yeah, on the one hand, men and women are reduced to these almost mechanical. Um, if you press these buttons, they will respond like this. If you press these buttons, they will respond like this. Um, the idea that men and women are all exactly the same. There was obviously this is a heterosexual context of like a boot camp. Men have paid to go there to meet women, but it's kind of there's a fetishization of like what's natural, like women naturally want this, men naturally should want this, men should naturally be like this, be dominant, be kind of assertive, and if you're not really a man, and this kind of very essentialist view. And as you say, the that stuff was also kind of the that was kind of like market neoliberal, for want of a better term. Language was also kind of it came marinated in that. So yeah, it was seen as the dating world was seen as like a market, and you're essentially a product, and you have to. Women are given a number between 1 and 10 based on purely on their physical appearance, and as a man, you're supposed to kind of become a increase your sexual market value, and be a product and become a better product so that you're more valuable in the marketplace. And it's treated as like non-ideological, but it's a very ideological view of the world, which you can kind of, the more time you spend in those subcultures, ostensibly just to meet people, the more you're kind of imbibing that fairly toxic, or what can be a fairly toxic worldview that can lead to some of the darker manifestations of the manosphere, like Andrew Tate. I mean, Andrew Tate had his own dating course. He put out in the past. Yeah, so I mean, they're grifters, but yeah, it comes with, and they're trying to make you feel insecure to sell you stuff. But they're also promoters of a very reactionary ideology.
yeah. Well, you mentioned your own your own personal flirtation with pickup artistry in the early manosphere. Um, just to get a bit meta for a moment, you've also recently, for the book, you've sort of embedded yourself within these boot camps as a journalist, and I think you say that you've got to keep one foot in, one foot out. So I wonder if you just reflect on that a little bit, the experience of I don't want to say infiltrating these these
Sort of, yeah.
yeah. Um, but given that you also had some genuine personal experience with it in the past. Um, I just wonder what that feels like, what how that affects your interpretation or your writing about it.
Yeah, so I mean the first part of the book is me relaying my experience from 20 years, almost 20 years ago, on this boot camp in London when I'm kind of young, green individual who's shy and socially awkward and comes to London, comes to the big city from Somerset to do a yeah, to listen to these guru figures who purportedly have it all figured out, and I'm willing to believe them at the time for reasons I go into in the book. But then yeah, going back into that world, like yeah, 17 years later or something, maybe it was. Um, I say about you've got to keep one foot in, one foot out because it's as a journalist you sort of have to do that anyway. And these are kind of cultish. There are cult-like tendencies to the various subsections of the manosphere. There are cult-like tendencies to uh, it's about discrediting the mainstream and then presenting themselves as like saviors, guides, gurus, um, figures who you should give money to because they've got it all figured out. There are even, there are even. I've been at many of these when I revisited this world as a journalist to kind of explore what had happened since I'd been away. Because so I did the boot camp and then I went away. Then kind of I went to university shortly after and kind of I started going out more. That kind of fixed like 90% of my social, uh, you know, my bad social skill, my poor social skills, my that improved from just going out and being so pushing myself to go out there. So I learned that was useful. That by making yourself go out, seeing is something you can improve your social skills. I'd learned that at least, and then I kind of, oh, this stuff's kind of silly. You don't really need all this stuff to meet people, and then drifted away. And then 2018, my editor at the Atlantic Books asked me essentially, would I write a book about the Manosphere because it started people like Jordan Peterson, the incel community. It was becoming a bit more of a bigger thing. A couple of years later, Andrew Tate, go and investigate it. And so yeah, I was reluctant to do that because first of all, because I'd have to tell my own rather embarrassing story of my own foray into the pickup scene, and I'd memory hold it. I didn't want to revisit it, let alone to tell everyone about it. But it made good. It also made good copy. Like the publisher's like, oh, you should definitely write about this. I mean, it's easier for them to say that, I guess. But so I went back into that world, and I'm older, more cynical. Been a journalist for like the best part of a decade, but almost a decade by that point. And I didn't feel like I was going to be like radicalized or something by going into that world and like investigating it. I'd already kind of yeah, like a cynical old hand. I wasn't like the 23-year-old guy who like went on a megabus to London to like with a suitcase full of dreams. I wasn't that person anymore. But yeah, because it's very cult like. It's that's the attraction in many ways. It's they even some of them tell you to uh, you know, let go of family members, friends who are holding you back. I mean, they used to say something like, "Oh, you're the sum of the five." It's a self-help dictum, one of those pithy maxims of the self-help community. Oh, you're the sum of the five people you hang out with the most. And they would say, oh, your family and friends may be skeptical of this new path you're taking, but you should just cut them off if you need to. And so yeah, it's a cult-like place, and it's you don't want to go full Neil Strauss where you basically go native. Um, but that's true of all forms of extremism, radicalization, radical communities. Yeah, I felt like I was prepared for that beforehand, really.
So there wasn't a moment then when you were investigating it that you were ever tempted by any of the ideas on offer.
I mean, I'd heard it all before, really. It was kind of the most shocking things were some of the red pill, more political aspects, which I'll go into shortly. But I mean, I was embedded in Las Vegas with this thing called the Men of Action program. It's like men paying thousands of pounds, thousands of dollars, $10,000 for this course which purports to teach them how to be high status alpha males, quote unquote. So, I mean, from a not from a non-American perspective, that was quite like mirth inducing. It was, there's a comedic aspect to that. It's like British people don't, I mean, most Americans don't, but British men don't go around calling themselves alpha males so much. And it involved like photo shoots with like in the desert next to like Lamborghinis, rented Lamborghinis for your social media to present like an image of being high status. And that's easier to pass off, I think, in the US. It's a slightly more materialistic culture, certainly in Vegas. Um, so no, I mean that was I mean I didn't hate all the people I met who were on the course or anything. I got on with some of those people. It's but yeah, I always had to retain kind of my own like identity. Uh, I wasn't like I didn't they knew I didn't hide that I was a writer. Unlike, my previous book where I'm undercover, I never hid that I was a journalist writer. Um, but also, yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying to fit in, whereas I'm using like misogynistic language or,
Mm.
I had to keep my own thing, but while also being um, clubbable, a bit, like I'm not going to go in there steaming in there just like berating them and arguing with them. I'm there to like observe, learn what they think, have a debate, but I'm not going to get, I'm investigating. It's different from like if it was on a YouTube debate with someone or something.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, did anyone sort of know you by reputation or by your writing when you
Yeah,
went
there
in?
was yeah, some of them did, yeah, because I'd been out there first of all in 2019 when I first met some of the people in Vegas. I'd been out there shortly after Hired, my previous book Hired had come out, and I had, my social media was plastered with a bunch of that stuff, book stuff, and yeah, I never hid that. So they knew. But I was also someone who was open with them about the fact that I'd done the pickup boot camp when I was younger. And again, I'm not trying to come at this stuff from a place of like I condemn these like terrible men. I mean, some of them I do, but it's also understanding radicalization and understanding that like I'm not immune to that. I don't think I was any more immune to that some of that stuff than other people because I did the boot camp, right? So I think that opened the doors a bit more to me. They were a bit more like, oh, this guy kind of understands a bit more than if I just went in there just as like a hack, a British, who's this pompous like British hack? They're just like looking down on us. Whereas it's like, no, I understand like the appeal of some of this stuff, like what it draws on those insecurities, and because I've been through that myself.
Mm. Yeah, no, I was just thinking about the how you mentioned the difference between Britain and America in this aspect.
Like if I post,
The
if I've got
only
those photos with me with it, it wasn't a Lambo. The photo I've got myself, it's like it's a sports car, like an Audi, an Audi sports car, on the top of some like club in Vegas. And if I put that on, I put it on now as like publicity type stuff, publicity shots for the book. But if I just put that up, I know with one of those self-help comments, I think I'd lose a bunch of friends from social media, and people would like, "What the hell's going on with this guy?" Some people actually said that when I was in Vegas, like, "What's he doing?" It was like the investigation, yeah.
I know I was thinking when you were describing how they tell you to post on Instagram, like
Yeah.
I was thinking, well, God, I'm doing it all wrong, aren't I?
Aren't we all though? But then that's the kind of they make you feel like you're doing it all wrong to then present the solution, which they sell to you. And it's kind of that's part of it. I mean, and it like there's a grain of truth to it. It's like presentation matters more in the world we live in now, in terms of certain things. Like there is a more pressure to like perform through like platforms like Instagram, or show that you're living this fantastic life. I mean, not everyone feels the pressure, but a lot more people do, I think, than in the past. It feels like you're because everyone else is kind of broadcasting this sensational life sometimes. I think you can grow out of that, but when you're a young guy, sometimes yeah, it can make you feel like you're lacking something, and they really kind of tap into that, and then like double down on it, and make you feel like, well, this is actually the real world. This is not fake. This is how the world is, and if you don't buy my course, you're going to be one of the surplus men who's left behind.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that difference between America and Britain uh, in this sphere. Um, I was thinking you say British people don't tend to go around announcing that they're alpha males and the rest of it. But of course, the most famous alpha male in the world happens to be English, British, Andrew Tate.
British American, I think.
British, yes.
Yeah, I think
But
he's got
I
dual.
think a friend of mine once said that he you would think he was American, and he sounds like an American putting on a really bad British accent. Um, but yeah, he was brought up in Britain, and he's become this uh, well, monster really. But yeah, he's the most famous alpha male in the world. Who
Yeah, I'd say that. I'm just trying to think if I've heard him call. I'm sure he does. I'm just trying to think if I've heard him call himself an alpha male, or it's just assumed in his content. He probably has at some point. I probably just forgotten. But I think that also speaks to a way that the culture has become more Americanized in certain aspects in the UK, or you could say globally. And social media has helped to kind of perpetuate that homogenization of, if you like, a North American way of life, value system, among certain very online groups. So yeah, if you spend a lot of time on Instagram, the majority of content you'll see will be American, and it will be these kind of figures who promote this hyper materialistic lifestyle. And yeah, for us, and I think it's a class thing as well. Like for those of us who are like middle class now, or do middle class jobs, or are kind of in that world, there isn't much status attached to like posing with a rented sports car, or even just posing by a sports car. It's like it's that like vulgar materialism is seen as gauche and yeah, a bit
that's
pathetic.
the exact word I had in my mind as you were speaking.
Yeah, it's very much like that, I would say. And but then if I go home, like, well, what used to be my home in a small seaside town in Somerset, where I'm from, is some people would think that was cool. Some of the people I grew up with would think that was cool. And I don't mean that in like a condescending way. It's just kind of a value system thing, class thing, the type of content they're consuming. It's you're told that that's like cool and you should aspire to it. But yeah, there is American, especially Vegas. I mean, not all parts of America are even like that, but Vegas is like a yeah, like clown place. It's just a bit of a joke, you know. It's I'm just trying to think of some phrase to describe it, but it's everything is ridiculous and larger than life, and um yeah, in that scenario, having status is yeah, is equated with sports cars, in mansions with infinity pools, private jets, and these guys don't have them. The people who take these courses, but they rent them to put on their social media, so it looks like they're high status males in their eyes. And then they message women from those accounts and
Yeah.
invite them out, and then the women arrive and like, where's this lifestyle? They're in their basement or whatever.
No, yeah, no, it does seem just as a general point that um, America does seem to export the worst of itself rather than the best, but that's a much broader topic. um, but the other main figure of the Manosphere, perhaps, is somebody who actually seems quite different to Andrew Tate, with Jordan Peterson. Um, Sorry, my throat's going a bit.
That's right.
But uh, but but yeah, Jordan Peterson, who seems on the surface quite a different figure. So how can you group Jordan Peterson, the friendly Canadian psychologist, with the alleged sex trafficker Andrew Tate?
Yeah, I mean, grouping together, I mean, in terms of their part, they're different kind of, they play a different kind of role, a very different kind of role in this, in the same ecosystem, I would say. Whereas Jordan Peterson's kind of the stern father figure, Andrew Tate's the bad boy, like charismatic, big brother. That's the kind of role those people play, I suppose, in some ways, as influencers for like the attraction in some ways. But I mean, Peters is more like traditional. Well, he was at least. I think there's a distinction to be made between early Peterson and current Peterson. So when Jordan Peterson first kind of appeared on, when he kind of blew up in 2017, 2018, when he became like super famous. At one point, I'd say he's probably the most famous intellectual in the world. For a period of time, he was. And he was espousing kind of a fairly traditional conservative point of view. And with that, yeah, he was promoting, traditional gender norms, traditional gender roles, even kind of rubbishing the idea that you could fix inequality with state intervention, and inequality was something that was natural and that kind of arose from natural differences between individuals, and people weren't oppressed by capitalism, and it was actually you just need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps type stuff. But it wasn't it wasn't particularly unusual when I heard this stuff or read his book. It was some of the self-help stuff is not bad advice. You should there are things you should sometimes not take the path of least resistance. It's good for you to do that. And he was someone who it felt kind of countercultural, him saying that in a culture where it's often kind of consumer culture, even where it's that even the left has a critique of that as well, that sometimes just doing something because it feels good isn't always the best thing for you. It doesn't bring like lasting satisfaction, like just being a consumer or something. And Peterson had that aspect too, which I still think has value. But I mean, in more recent times, he's become a crank, a conspiracy theorist, pushing this kind of pseudo Christianity while never saying if he actually believes in God or Jesus Christ himself. He kind of a cultural. He uses Christianity as like a cudgel to push this hyper reactionary, like radical right politics. I would say he spread conspiracy theories about COVID vaccines, saying that he said that a new COVID variant emerges whenever the pharmaceutical share price drops, implying that they're concocting this to boost their share price. Um, he's just become weirder and more angry, more conspiratorial. Said that the UK was going to turn into Venezuela under Keir Starmer. Um, yeah, he's just become a bit more of a boring, tub thumping, uh, big mouth.
Mm.
That whereas he used to have some interesting things to say, now I just find he's like railing against this imaginary like postmodern neo-Marxist. I mean, that in itself is a contradiction. Railing against this imaginary like communist woke elite or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of Peterson's trajectory?
Not much.
Yeah, that's probably the correct answer, right?
Well, I mean, a man who ponders whether Putin might have had a point
Oh
in
yeah,
invading
exactly that as
Ukraine
well. Yeah.
is not. I mean, I've never really been enchanted by him at all. Even when he was speaking his self-help stuff, I just didn't really care.
Yeah.
He always seemed like I don't want to say grifter because I think he believes what he says for the most part, but he just always seemed like an unserious person. I never really thought
Oh,
his
listen.
views were worth taking seriously, though he is as a cultural figure. But I don't think anything he says really is worth taking seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of me, like half of me thinks like believes that, but then the other half of me, like because I'm like investigating this stuff, it's like I have to kind of, all right, so I've got to figure out why people will like it. Like I don't, yeah, like I don't get it. I don't, and I think he has this like messiah complex, and he's like a narcissist. He's been kind of vocal about some of his mental health issues, and no shame in that. But he has this like grandiosity. about him, and I think that partly explains his kind of descent, his downfall a bit as well. He couldn't really handle the criticism. I mean, many of us might not be able to on that scale, but the pushback he got, he couldn't handle it, and it's kind of sent him a bit crazy. But he doesn't really make, yeah. I try to understand it as part of my investigation, but
Mm.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I would never say that I find him kind of particularly enthralling myself, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree essentially. I mean, as I said, I think he's worth taking seriously as a cultural figure and
I don't think anymore that.
influential.
Yeah, I think I think he's a joke now. I think he's a joke figure.
Yeah,
He was always slightly ridiculous, and I didn't really understand these people treating him as like a messiah. Like just people on at his events, like running up on stage and like asking him to like fix them, and like
really, I didn't even I don't know
yeah, there
that
was
back.
and people crying in the like I don't know. It's like I've been to masculinity events, workshops for the research where like I went to a Jungian men's retreat in Stoke Newington in 2000, end of 2023, like the tail end of the research, and it was. I mean, there was a lot of like woo woo type stuff around that, but it was quite good. It was like I could see over 2 days there was like a lot of kind of introspection and vulnerability around like other men and discussing kind of things that men aren't like supposed to. Men don't often feel comfortable discussing like identity, sexuality, um, yeah, like I don't know, gender identity, like all kinds of things like that. And I see value in that. And there was things where people were talking about fears, and like some people like were crying and stuff, and because they never talked about these things that had happened to them in the past, maybe before someone who was like abused. And it was quite like heavy, but it felt like quite profound. Like it was, you don't need to believe, like maybe people do, but you don't need to believe in all the like magician, warrior, king, Jungian like taxonomy to find some useful use in that. But I feel the Petersonian thing, there's a very performative aspect to some of his like, he break the weepy kind of messiah stuff that it just feels a bit like a performance, yeah, like a grift, like you say, like a grift, like it's a this persona he puts on for money, and then has a university which is a bit of a racket, his own university where it's just a bunch of online videos purporting to be a replacement for like the woke tyranny of traditional university. It's a racket, isn't it?
Must be a hard choice choosing between that and PragerU.
Yeah, PragerU. Yeah,
But no, I mean,
that's
I
probably better
don't,
though. I think PragerU is probably. I mean, obviously, I'm not, that's a low bar, but it's you're probably going to get more from watching that than the Peterson University.
no, I mean, I don't mean to be totally blasé about it because I think what you say about some of the things that are offered in these courses are very valuable. I mean, this discussion and openness between men is a great thing.
Yeah, Peterson is someone I think who part of his appeal, if I'm gonna, so I can do the make the more like positive argument for Peterson. Like I think there's, like I've said, he taps into something, the idea of it's a very simple idea, but maybe some people have never heard that before, that taking the path of least resistance is not always good for you. Stop playing computer games, turn the pornography off, go and like lift some weights or something, or it doesn't have to be that, but do something, challenge yourself. Can be good. But the negative, my more negative, more cynical view is just like his appeal was partly because he makes people feel like they understand all of politics, history, philosophy without having to actually study any of them. I think it's that veneer of not really needing to do the work, but feeling like you now understand all of this stuff and have it all figured out. Um, and not having to do the hard yards of the reading, the like slogging through the text, the dense like text and stuff. You just listen to him kind of go on one of his rants.
Mm,
Watch a video instead.
mm. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose this leads us nicely into politics and religion uh, more directly. Um, I mean, actually, when you were talking about the cult like aspect of the manosphere stuff, you know, that you've got to reject your family and or cast aside people who are not conducive to your self improvement or whatever. It's cult like, but uh, I mean, just as an aside, it's a bit reminiscent of some of Jesus Christ's statements. But leaving that aside, um, what is the relationship between the manosphere and religion? Because as you say, Jordan Peterson has this sort of pseudo Christianity, and Andrew Tate is apparently a Muslim. Is he still a Muslim? I don't know.
I
Has he
don't know.
converted
I
back
mean,
or apostatized or whatever?
yeah, I mean, there is so the conference, a conference I write about in the book, a Red Pill conference, like the biggest one uh, in the world, or it was in 2022 in Orlando, Florida. I met a journalist there who was writing about the conference, and I don't think the article ever materialized or what happened with that. But we were talking. We had some drinks one night at the bar, and we were talking about like the God pill, the aspects of the manosphere. I didn't really. I feel like I should probably write an essay on that or something because it wasn't something that I really had time to explore again in the book because it's another really big question. But the God pill is like the you've seen some of these figures, not just in the manosphere, like Russell Brand would be an example. The current like rump of what was UKIP is kind of is tilting towards evangelical Christianity, and like wedding this like hyper masculinity to walking around shoving like giant crosses in people's faces, anti-asylum seeker protests. Um, but yeah, the God pillars, you've seen this turn among certain masculinity influences. So the conference in Orlando, I was surprised. I didn't know. I didn't expect that. There was a pastor speaking there, um, who'd who was he was going around. Funny, he was going around saying he gave some like lecture on like homosexuality, and then don't be gay, that's bad for you. And then there was some people was saying stuff like that, like homophobia was like ubiquitous there. But then, I looked up his record and he'd been kicked out of the military for I can't remember the exact phrasing they used, but for homosexuality, basically, for homosexual acts or whatever it was described that way in the 90s. Um, so there was obviously some kind of hypocrisy there, but there was also like religious tinge, like traditionalism tinge with religion. It come into that community more than I was expecting. Um, which makes sense in a way. It's like the original grift. Like they're going back to the original grift of in some ways like religion. In my view, I mean at least certain manifestations of religion. I think is like evangelism, the Baptist Church. I mean, um, yeah, I mean that's part of it. There's also kind of there's a psychological thing of some of these people like they're against all the things they've got bored of doing themselves. Like you have these former playboy like proclaimed like playboys who are now like advocates of traditionalism and the church and traditional values. Um, which yeah, there's there and similarly with the kind of repressed like homosexuality with some like there is like with some of these people there's like some weird psychological thing going on. There are people like Russell Brand who are accused of things and then try to make this great show of repentance by kind of being baptized, or it's just a new grift to me. And there's no certainty in the world, so we have these conversations a lot about crisis of meaning. You listen to these podcasts, and I don't think it's necessarily untrue. There is a crisis of meaning. It's kind of a banality. It's like a banal phrase, crisis of meaning in the world. They really go on about this stuff on these bro manosphere podcasts and stuff. They have done for a long time, and I just think religion is something that they can pick up. They can kind of adapt to their own already kind of quite reactionary traditionalist points of views of gender relations, views of like politics, and then use that as a cudgel to kind of browbeat other people and say, well, like it's not a new thing. They've just discovered that religion can be a useful tool to kind of justify their politics. Um, it gives them some like theological credence to their nonsense, basically. You know what I mean? It's like it comes.
Yeah.
That's not a new thing. Capitalists have done that before. Used an ideology, whether it's scientific racism to justify like forms of exploitation, or religion to justify kind of different hierarchies. I think these people just find it useful in the same way. They just treat it as if it's this very novel thing, like they're the first people to discover this, and it's like it's quite provincial. It's
Yeah.
quite a provincial world.
It's a material world.
Yeah, it's a provincial. The Manosphere is quite a provincial place, so they will treat, as you mentioned about Jordan Peterson earlier, they will treat someone like that as if he's saying things that have never been said before.
Mm.
Um, they may have heard it before, but that's a quite an important distinction. That might be the first time they've heard it. I mean, but
Mm.
that's quite an important distinction. Doesn't mean it's somehow novel itself.
Yeah. So I used to think, I'm not sure really, I don't think I see it anymore, but I used to sort of think that we're going to see a lot of right-wing people turning to Islam. Um, this sort of macho traditionalist religion, rather than the wishy-washy Western Christianity. And I thought Andrew Tate might have been an example of that. Um, but now, as you say, I mean, I don't really think it. I don't think that anymore. I think that it's now people have sort of revived this version of Christianity to serve that purpose. But I
You've
do
you've
sometimes
spoken you've
wonder.
spoken about that, haven't you? You spoke at the secularism event in London. I heard you give a speech, I think, about how this idea of cultural Christianity being used as kind of a um, like a battering ram in terms of saving Western civilization against like
Mm,
the brown hordes or something. The this idea that Judeo-Christian, they use that term just to keep the right wing Zionists in their midst on side and stuff. Even though the relationship between those two groups is has often historically been extremely fraught, to say the least. But yeah, you've spoken very very well on that, I think, in the past.
no,
That
well,
subject.
thank you. But yeah, no, I did used to wonder whether more of these sorts of people would turn to Islam as a solution, which would have been quite funny to watch. I kind of wish
Yeah.
it happened. It would have been hilarious to see to see these defenders of Western civilization against the hordes of Islam suddenly turn around and think, Western civilization is lost. The only thing that can save it is fundamentalist, good old times religion, and the only place we see that now is in Islam. So we'll just
I've
hop
heard
along to
sympathetic,
Islam.
like the Tate conversion or pseudo conversion aside. I have heard positive remarks from some Manosphere influence about how women are treated in certain Islamic countries. I think I've heard Rollo Tomasi talk about that before. How well under Islam they haven't women don't get everything their own way, and this is kind of posited as something that's is good. They haven't succumbed to kind of Western decadence or whatever. But I think the reason that hasn't happened is because a lot of these groups kind of come uh, marinated in like pseudo-scientific race science type stuff. Like it isn't. I've noticed it isn't that big a leap from some of the really like I'm not someone who's going to like completely dismiss like evolutionary psychology. I think it does sometimes produce interesting stuff. I don't think like evolution like stopped at the neck necessarily. I think there are certain patterns that they've observed in terms of like mating behavior among human beings that are valid and interesting. But I think the Manosphere and other people can draw on that stuff and really like bastardize it and
Yeah,
um, use it as like a rationale and justification for uh, inequalities among men and women, but also it's very easy for that stuff to segue, I think, into some of the race science. I've seen that among some people, and the racism, I think, overrides the any admiration they might have for Islam. So the kind of among those communities, there's racism tends to be a bit more predominant, at least in the more red pill quarters, which kind of inoculates them against any sympathy they might have had for Islam. At least
Mm.
that was something I observed. I mean, it's not going to be universally true, but
Just on that point about evolutionary psychology, that was one of the things I appreciated actually about the book is because I was a bit worried that you were going to completely dismiss the whole field as a
crash it. Yeah,
yeah,
you
as
do
a
see that a lot. It's like
yeah.
one side or the other. Yeah.
But as you say, I mean, it's a valid scientific field. It's produced a lot of worthwhile stuff, but
Yeah,
also
yeah. I
it's
reviewed
has
a
a
book by David Buss. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
I reviewed a
No,
book by
no, no.
David Buss, kind of a leader in the field a few years ago called Bad Men, and I thought it was really good, really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. So I was pleased with that. Um, because I think it's a bit of an easy target.
Yeah,
But yeah, of course it can be bastardized, misappropriated by people with their own agendas, and sometimes people within the field themselves are a bit unsavory. But on the whole, I think it's a valid scientific field. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's definitely a valid scientific field for
yeah.
sure.
Um, but I mean, I don't want to keep you for too much longer. So but I do have a couple more things I'd like to
Yeah, sure.
get into. If yeah, um, I did actually want to go back to this point about sexuality. This you know, as you say, homophobia is rife in the manosphere. Um, Ironic in some ways, given the extreme homoeroticness of some of it, and male separatism is
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah. And there's a guy called
but
Jack Donovan who's
yeah, I was good. Yeah,
yeah,
that's yeah.
yeah. I mean, he's
Tell us about
sorry.
him.
Finish your
No,
question.
no, I was just saying, yeah, tell us about Jack Donovan then. Interesting guy.
Yeah, so he spoke at the conference I was at. I attended in Orlando as part of the research, and he just remember he doesn't call himself gay because he thinks that's been hijacked like by liberals and like the kind of gay community. He doesn't identify with that. He thinks it's he's a masculinist, I think is the word he uses. He's like gays. He's like homosexuals are just guys when you just get like without the women there. That's his kind of. It's a weird like he rejects gay culture is what he would say. But he's kind of been a member of these kind of fascist groups in the past where it is like male separatism, like Wolves of Vinland, this kind of American like group, almost not quite a militia, but going that way and use like Nazi imagery, far right kind of themes around like warrior masculinity, tribal masculinity, a bunch of like men going off into the woods together and like standing around roaring fires, like yelling, having duels with each other. And yeah, I think like homosexuality is it's a funny thing with that some of those groups because it's like there is I don't want to kind of psychologize too much, but there is with some of those groups is like they only feel like they can behave that way that they maybe are inclined I'm guessing are inclined that they want to behave that way in a certain context because they have all of these hang-ups about um well I'm not going to be a real man if I just if they just go to a gay bar or something they have to it has to be in this context or it's a funny like psychological thing that
I can I can
yeah does that
follow me
make
as
sense?
long as there's a swastika behind me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, just in this hyper masculine context, because then it doesn't really count. In the same way that you have in some cultures the kind of in some cultures particularly in like Latin America that in it's not seen as so taboo for men to ostensibly straight men to have homosexual relations if they're the dominant partner. It's seen as effeminate. So that's in Cuban culture. There's that aspect to the homophobia. There's this kind of hypermasculine homosexuality is not frowned upon in the same as like an effeminate homosexuality. So that permeates the manosphere as well. And just kind of that again, that kind of the reason why to be a man, to be a man in the manosphere, to be a kind of to perform masculinity correctly, it's one of the traits is to be kind of the dominant alpha male with women, have like a harem of women, or be kind of sexually successful with women. And if you're not, if you're not kind of buying into that, I mean, if you're gay, you're not obviously buying into that value system. Like automatically, you're not, and so you're kind of rejected. Um, yeah, if that makes sense, you're kind of rejected because you don't conform to that very narrow idea of what being a man is,
Mm.
and homosexuality falls outside of that. It's kind of yeah, it's sort of that straightforward, really. They have a very rigid idea of what men should be, a very rigid idea of what women should be, and if you fall outside of that, not even being gay, but just being like a more like gender non-conforming man, you don't count. You don't. You're not really a man.
Mm.
Yeah.
I do kind of well, I do wonder how many illicit liaisons went on in the Wolves of Vinland when they were
Yeah,
in the
I mean,
forests around the fires.
I mean,
But
Jack Donovan's slightly more interesting because he's actually like openly homosexual.
mm,
It's he's a more interesting character, but again, he's still kind of a fascist. But he would say not a white supremacist because after the 2017 Unite the Right march in the US, where someone died and there were like open Nazism, he kind of left those groups and said like he wants white supremacists to like burn his books if they have them and stuff. And yeah, I mean, he's a more complex character than some of the other people I met or interacted with.
I will say though, as I mean, you spoke about your own sort of flirtation with the pickup community. Um, I kind of a long time ago, I used to sort of like the idea of the Jack Donovan label of androphile rather
That's
than
it.
gay.
Androphile. That's the name. Yeah.
Um, I thought, well, I don't want to be one of these camp, effeminate gays. So that sounds like a better option. But that's about as far as I went into that. I thought, I just don't want to be camp. I just don't want to be part of that. Things
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
changed since then considerably. I'm very much on the opposite side of that now. But in a way, I kind of understand the temptation to to want to disassociate yourself from the from the feminine, I suppose.
Yeah. And I suppose like that's another way that kind of society, you can feel like society might be trying to put you in a role that you don't feel comfortable with, in terms of like in the same way that like there's a kind of pressure on like heterosexual men to be a certain way because like otherwise you're like the manosphere trucks in that you need to be this, and it's this very narrow definition of masculinity. And yeah, there is that with, or there has been at least more in the past, that if yeah if you're gay you're expected to be a certain way, right? And yeah, it chafes if you're not like it chafes, I think, in whoever you are, like if you're not that role that someone's trying to really hard to put you into.
So that sort of brings me back in a way to the political aspect of all this. Again, which you discuss in the book, the link between the manosphere and the far right, and the sort of, I mean, personally, I would pretty much call Trumpism a form of fascism these days. Um,
Yeah, me too.
there's a link there, and I wonder if you wanted to talk a little bit about that because it goes back a long way, as you discussed.
Yeah, and some people don't like the fascism label because I guess because some often the only historical example they associate with that are the Nazis or gas chambers or Yeah, or the Second World War, or storm, Nazi stormtroopers or something marching through like Prague or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there are other historical examples. So you meet like admire in the more kind of cerebral uh, corners of like the radical right, far right now in the US and the UK. You'll meet like you soon meet admirers of like General Franco or Augusto Pinochet, or even we're not quite so much Mussolini, but because there is that more of that stigma attached to anything in close proximity to the Holocaust, even though Franco kind of was um, less than Mussolini, but I mean, again, a very extremely low bar. But yeah, you do encounter that stuff, and you do encounter kind of so I encountered theorists like Julius Evola, who was Italian Nazi fascist who moved to Germany because he preferred Hitler to Mussolini. And I have seen the writings of his writings cited by masculinity manosphere figures who have this who kind of truck in that kind of pseudo intellectualism. Julius Evola saw Western society as decadent because it was overtly feminine, and he thought his anti that fed into his anti-Semitism as well. So Jewish life was seen as overly like intellectual and therefore again feminine, as opposed to kind of the man of action, the fascist like idol, the fascist Superman, the man of action who wasn't just kind of buried in books all day, but yeah, action rather than theory, essentially. Yeah, I did encounter that in my journey through the Manosphere, and I also encountered open like anti-Semitism at some of the conferences I attended, where again I didn't know to expect that, but it was partly kind of they were already kind of in this world of conspiracy theories. They believe that women controlled everything, whereas also women were kind of weakened, hysterical, and overly emotional, and you shouldn't give women the vote, but then somehow they also control everything. So some of these people were squaring that conspiracy theory by drawing on a much older one, which was that women were being controlled behind the scenes by a cabal of Jews. That was I mean, you've seen like Andrew Tate, you've seen Dan Bilzerian, you've seen Myron Gaines from the what used to be the popular Red Pill podcast, Fresh and Fit. All of these characters have veered into anti-Semitic remarks, anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial in the case of Dan Bilzerian. Um, Met people at these conferences who were implicated in January 6th and also were Holocaust deniers. Yeah, because that is the kind of that I wouldn't say maybe the oldest conspiracy theory is that residual kind of material is there still in these far right circles. They increasingly meshing with the manosphere to draw on. So it doesn't take long before they find it and they pick it up and use that to explain. That becomes their new old conspiracy theory. Yeah, I mean that was why it becomes more conspiratorial, or more dangerous in some ways. And yeah, there are all these kind of. I mean, once you start to swim in those ecosystems, then you go to these conferences and someone will introduce you to Julius Evola or some other kind of some other like fascist thinker or theorist or some other ideas, and you start to, great replacement theory, I heard. The idea that whites are being systematically replaced by non-whites in Europe and America. For some, that was, again, a Jewish conspiracy. Jews were doing that to, yeah, I mean, you can see how it kind of leads into, yeah, I met some guy at one of the conferences who subsequently went to prison for storming the Capitol on January 6th because he thinks the government's like controlled by, I don't know, really. Joe Biden's just a puppet for someone, and yeah, they're all kind of these conspiracy theories very often like bleed into one another, right?
Yeah, I mean, just as an aside that occurs to me, as you say, there's this view of the Jews, which is that they're too bookish and pointy-headed, and they're all about theory, not action, all the rest of it. I do sometimes I wonder whether sort of a ultra Zionist movement as a kind of reaction against that. You know, it's kind of manosphere of its own. We've got to be
Partly
tough.
it is, yeah.
We've
I
got
mean,
to, we've got to show these Palestinians what's what.
yeah, I mean, partly historically, there has been a faction of the Zionist movement which has seen like they need to recreate themselves as a different kind of people, as a kind of people of the land, a kind of a military people, a fighting people, as opposed to kind of the Jewish intellectual life that perished, as it was seen as. And you do have that right wing Zionist current which sees that as there is sort of like, well, that element of Jewish culture perished, the weak perished, and we have to be the strong. There is that kind of perversely like social Darwinian aspect of certain, I wouldn't say Zion, I wouldn't just like say Zionism, but to right wing Zionism,
mm.
certainly of the weak perished, and we survived because we were stronger.
Yeah, I mean that was, I mean that's a whole other a whole other
Yeah,
talk.
that's a whole other can of worms.
But apart from that, the yeah, I just wondered if, I mean, you discussed the links between the Manosphere and Trump and his victory in 2024. How what is the relationship now between the Manosphere and Trump? Are they still best buds?
Yeah, I mean it's I'm slightly just because I'm not kind of watching Manosphere content all the time now like I was during the writing of the book. Like thankfully. So since the election, I'm not privy to what they're saying. The Manosphere specifically is saying about Trump now. It was Trump was they wanted him to win. There was like in the period when Joe Biden was president, when I was doing most of my research. Um, they saw that kind of there would be a lot of rhetoric about how um, there wasn't going to be another election. Well, first of all, that it was accepted in the red pill circles as a given that the 2020 election was rigged against Trump. The storming of the Capitol was like the people rising up against the liberal elite and these populist cliches. And there was a lot of kind of conspiratorial talk about Biden just being a puppet, yeah, as I said before, and the United States being like a shithole governed by feminism is what I heard people say at the Red Pill conference. And Trump was seen as, yeah, the first term was seen as he was very popular on the Manosphere forum, Red Pill forums, and Reddit and 4chan when he ran the first time, especially against Hillary Clinton, who's in their eyes was seen to like encapsulate the kind of the kind of a feminist establishment, the lean in feminism. I mean, even among some Bernie Sanders supporters, like Hillary Clinton, it was generally unpopular outside of that kind of technocratic liberal politics, centrist politics. I mean, there's a lot of good criticisms of the Clintons. Christopher Hitchens, obviously, being a historic example of someone who wrote very good critiques of both Bill and Hillary Clinton. But the Manosphere, it was drenched in misogyny, the Manosphere view of Hillary Clinton. So Trump was seen as like the alpha male who is going to restore American men to greatness. The first term was seen as, oh, Trump didn't go for it's the standard right wing, radical right view. The first term, Trump wasn't seen to have gone far enough, whereas this term, it's going to be like getting revenge and making America great again and getting revenge against the libs and the trans movement and stop. They're going to stop Joe Biden and Kamala Harris like transing your kids and it's always like 2 minutes to midnight. That's kind of been the rhetoric in the Manosphere, and it feeds into kind of the rhetoric from the administration, or at least from people like JD Vance, I would say. Trump is a bit more confused, a bit more uh, uh, decisions taken on like a seat of the pants basis, like a narcissism that if someone flatters him, he'll just change his mind. Whereas I think it's behind him, there are much more kind of ideologically driven actors like JD Vance who have this very clear idea of the type of society they want to create. Whereas I think Trump is just more volatile.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean that's kind of how you discuss. Well, actually, I mean, the epigraph to the book I found very interesting. You use C.S. Lewis, only by being terrible do they avoid being comic. and you kind of go into how these ideas have been mainstreamed. They're no longer really a fringe on the internet. The manosphere is we're all living in the manosphere now to an extent. Um, and yeah, I know that does seem to summarize the your point, the Lewis quote. Um, these people are laughable. They're wrong, and their ideas are stupid, and but they're terrible. And now they're extremely influential. Um, so I guess I'll finish off then with the question of what can be done. How do you combat the manosphere? Well,
Yeah, I mean,
I'll leave
the
that up to
quote,
you.
I couldn't improve on the quote, the C.S. Lewis quote. I mean, in terms of, because obviously during the process of writing the book, I come across a quote, or I'm reading something, and think is very apt in terms of the book's material. But that one I think soared above the rest in terms of how apt it was for the material and the people, the characters I was meeting. That I mean, it sums up fascism in a way, in certain manifestations of it. I mean, there's something inherently. I mean, people wrote about this. Orwell wrote about this, and others did in the 1930s about the goose step, as Orwell wrote about the goose step. Goose stepping is inherently, from an English point of view, preposterous. People would laugh in the street if they did that in the street here. His contention was that people would laugh at it, so it doesn't really culturally it doesn't really fly. But then there are also, fascism is inherently like ridiculous. The how serious it takes itself. I mean, is part of it is like you shall dare not laugh at me, and that in itself is funny. If you're not supposed to laugh at someone or something, it renders it funny for some reason. I remember that going all the way back to school. When you're not supposed to laugh at somebody or something, and there is that injunction not to, you invariably laugh. But then it's not enough to laugh at it, I suppose. Is Like at some point it stops, like the joke wears thin. It stops being funny. And I mean, it's not always, I mean, it's presumably been less funny, the Manosphere, to women all along. It's not been such a joke all along. Um, I think I use humor in my storytelling, so that was one reason why I find the quote useful, because it's like I think sometimes humor can be a way to undercut some of these like the pomposity of some of these characters, the self-seriousness, the self-regard they have for themselves as these kind of high status alpha males. Um, but yeah, humor's not enough. I mean, in terms of what to do about it is almost another book in some ways. So I mean, this book and with Hired, I didn't want to do the thing where I really don't like it when you read like a really good book and then like on the end, just tacked onto the end is like my 10-point plan to like fix all of this, because it feels like you're shortchanging the reader. This is a book about gurus, and I didn't want to present myself as a guru, as having have it all figured out, because I don't essentially. But there's a few points I suppose I can make. The Manosphere has become, in terms of what I didn't include in the book, and I'll probably include in like a preface to the paperback, the Manosphere has become more mainstream. Um, and it's not because of like films that shows like adolescence, you see it's like horrific murder by this boy who's it's hinted at that he's been consuming like Manosphere content, and he goes on to kill this female classmate. That isn't what happens like the vast majority of the time who people who get into the Manosphere. Yeah, there are cases of that kind of apocalyptic violence where someone's gone on shooting sprees, and people have gone on shooting sprees because they've been immersed in this culture. But it's more insidious and subtle than that. It's more that these attitudes creep into relationships through like coercive behavior, abusive behavior, and also into general attitudes. So the 80-20 rule, a manosphere trope that women are only pursuing 20% of men. So a poll taken by Ipsos in the UK earlier this year found that I think it was 53% of uh, men, like 16 to 24-year-old men, I think it was Gen Z, I suppose that would be, believe that women are only interested in high status men. And they were the only age demographic which believed that. And that's a manosphere, to me, that's a manosphere trope. That's something that's memed its way into the mainstream. Not because those people listen to Andrew Tate necessarily. It's just if you spend a lot of time on platforms like Instagram or TikTok or social media, this meme culture that's part of the meme culture, or it has become part of the meme culture. Same as like the same a couple years earlier, the same generation, in 2023, I think it was, or 2022, YouGov did a poll that found that Gen Z men are the only male generation, I think, apart from maybe the remnants of the war generation or something, that think feminism's gone too far. So millennials and Gen X certainly, and I think even boomers didn't think that, but um, Gen Z men think feminism's gone too far. And again, it's a manosphere. You see this like bleeding of these ideas into the mainstream, which is the real danger that then Andrew Tate's not going to be like president of the United States or prime minister. Yeah,
Let's hope not. I mean,
no, I
these
mean
days, anything can happen.
He's too polarizing. Figure like that is too polarizing. But it's what happens that these ideas get steadily taken up by more respectable figures in a similar way to Trump is like the front man of this like MAGA movement, but um, his appeal is also part of why why it's not quite fascism. Well, it's fascistic, but it's not kind of an established fascist state or something because of his kind of mercurial nature, his narcissistic nature, his ideology is his own like idea of himself in a way. Like, but behind him are people who have a very, very clear idea of what they want the country to look like, what they want to do. They don't kind of blow in the wind by, based on the last person to say nice things about him. So it's a bit more. You see it with Keir Starmer trying to manipulate him and Macron trying to manipulate him because he is manipulatable by flattery. Whereas you have these more determined people, I think, in the movement behind him, JD Vance and others who have their eye on the prize a lot more. Who, yeah, that's the greater danger than these like bombastic showmen who, at the moment anyway. When you get one that combines both, that's the real danger zone. You know what I mean? When you get someone who combines that telegenic charisma with the doctrinaire kind of, yeah, eye on the prize, know exactly what they're going to do and no scruples about doing it.
I think you talk about this this guy Alex in the book that you interviewed, and he kind of sort of self-educated himself out of his infatuation with the manosphere. And again, I know you don't want to give a 10 point program, but do you think that's not the solution, but a solution that
Yeah, I mean,
people will sort of think themselves out of it on their own time?
yeah, I mean, I do think, yeah, there is that. I mean, it shouldn't come down just that. I think there's a problem with with tech platforms and the fact that we have this kind of what in the past would have been like a public space is now owned by like a handful of oligarchs who can manipulate the algorithms in that space, manipulate the context in which conversations happen, manipulate which conversations reach the top of the pile and reach the biggest audience. So X, for example, I think there has to be democratic oversight of some of those. The fact that this is where politics takes place now. These digital space, the digital town square or whatever, as it's like called sometimes. The idea that these places can just be owned and manipulated by just politically activist oligarchs, I think is causing great damage to our politics. I wouldn't say I have the solution thrashed out because again, that's another pamphlet at least or book in terms of what needs to happen there. But this is causing a huge amount of trouble. I think at the moment, the incentives on platforms like X, um, the cash and clicks incentives to put out incendiary content with no real like falsehoods are no impediment to making a shit ton of money and making a name for yourself on these platforms. That's a huge structural issue that needs to be dealt with. But yeah, I mean, if I was giving advice to just somebody, like what Alex did was I think is a good way to go about kind of de-radicalizing yourself is like make female friends, seek out contrary perspectives, seek out like the opposing perspective, and like at least engage with it, and think about it. And even if you engage with it, and it's like a lot of things when you first engage with it, and you kind of every kind of fiber of your being is like, oh, this is rubbish. But then like bits land, even you don't know it. If you just engage with it, read it, it's bits of the material land, and you can maybe start to reflect on it a bit later. And also, yeah, not like understanding that the people you see online who have a bit of status or clout, they have financial interests. They're trying to sell you things. They're trying to make you feel insecure to sell you products. To sell people products. They in the same way that like we give it the benign term content, but it's advertising. I've mentioned this previously. It's we put like warnings on like junk food ads for like kids or something, but then like Andrew Tate is just like free to kind of go circumvent any other forms of socialization from like you know parents, teachers, and just can go straight to their cell phone with like no barrier. It's kind of a free for all, and just like make them feel, yeah, at an age when they often do feel insecure already. Like Alex had issues with parents. He didn't feel manly enough for a stepdad, had a domineering mother, and he was susceptible to that. He felt like he needed to prove himself, and he was susceptible to these masculinity grifters who sold him that they could be the answer to his problems. And yeah, I mean, it's such a multifaceted question in some ways. Like there isn't one answer. Different approaches work for different people. Male role models are good, I think, on a micro level. But again, the conversation around male role models tends to be like you need to find some celebrity male role model to look up to. Whereas I would counter that with, you should retain your critical faculties with anyone. You shouldn't just hero worship or be a fan of someone. You should critically, interrogate whatever someone says just because they have high status on the internet. You know what I mean? It's what's that Orwell quote? Say all saints should be presumed guilty until
Yeah.
proven innocent. I think that should apply. People should apply that to celebrities as well. Maybe that should be taught in school to be more skeptical of people who appear to have the trappings of like high status.
Hmm.
Maybe they know. Maybe they're experts in one area, not experts in another. That's
Yeah.
that's podcast. I'm just gonna final point, like the whole podcast culture of like 4 hour, like 3 hour, 4 hour podcasts or whatever. That is kind of I mean it's not a bad cultural development, I'm not saying, but there's a tendency of some people like gurudom, like a guru type mentality where someone's brought on to speak about their narrow area of expertise, but then they'll kind of discourse. They'll kind of talk about all of these meander over all these other areas they don't know that much about for the next like 3.5 hours, and yeah, often like throw out a bunch of like misinformation, and because they're very important people, high status people or whatever, and they're like authority figures, it
So
can it can help to spread misinformation, I think, and that's true of some of these manosphere channels as well.
so for the next 3 hours, I'm going to ask you to talk about the
Yeah,
latest
hopefully we
developments
haven't done that.
in quantum physics. Take it away. No,
Yeah, exactly. I'm not
I'll
gonna
just, I'll just,
go into that.
as I said, I want to wrap up. I don't want to keep you too long, although we've already been going on for a
Covered quite a
while.
lot of ground, yeah.
But I think before, just before we finish up, I just was curious as to whether you had received any reviews or pushback from some of the people you interviewed or infiltrated. As you say, you're when you go to these boot camps as a journalist, you're sort of mining them for content. Have they responded at all to the book?
I mean, not in any underhand way or anything. I mean, there's been kind of I think Michael Sartain's put out his own content or talked about, like, defended what he teaches and stuff, which is, fair enough. It's a that's kind of, legitimate debate or something. That is not like, I haven't been trolled by any of those people. I wouldn't expect. I like Michael Sartain, who ran the Men of Action program. He's quite an educated guy in many ways. He's more interesting than some of these figures I spoke with and encountered. I wouldn't expect him to do something like that, start trolling me or, fake accounts and stuff. There are kind of people who've had like who I, not people I investigated, but people just in the manosphere who've kind of, a negative review appears for my book, like, a few hours after it's been released, like just completely trashing it, which is like, come on, it's not like, you may not agree with it, you may not like all of it, but it's not like it's not like a bad, I don't think it's a bad book. Or just, ideologically motivated attacks on the book. I mean, I've had it's not been much though. I had one from like from the left actually. I had one like attack on it from someone who'd written an academic book on the manosphere in like Australia, who's got a bit of a reputation as like a gatekeeper on the subjects he kind of studies, who wrote like for a small publication, like trash, like completely trashed it. And it's just yeah, I mean, it's like, come on, it's like sometimes if someone goes too far, it's like it's self-discrediting. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like the book's got good reviews from FT, Richard Reeves, someone I respect on this subject. And yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive. And then you get one just like, oh, this is just like nothing of value in this book. It's there's usually something else going on. So I assume if it's like that, then it's some kind of, maybe that's a bit arrogant of me, but if it's really like can't find any value in it whatsoever. I mean, I think I've read vanishingly few books of which that was true ever. I mean, maybe one or two. Something by Tariq Ali I read, one of his newer books, which was awful. George Galloway, maybe.
Well,
Um, yeah, but it's vanishingly few. But yeah, but no, generally the response has been good. Yeah.
just as an author of a book, do you feel the need to respond to those kinds of attacks?
Uh, I haven't this time so far. I mean, certainly sometimes I don't think you should be like some of the there's been like broadly good reviews which will have a criticism where it's like, yeah, that's fair. I think that's probably, if I could go back, or in I'll add something about that in the preface to the paperback. Yeah, I think it's good to, like, you can kind of, this isn't my first rodeo. This is my first book. You kind of get a sense of when it's like a bit more bad faith criticism, which in the past I would have maybe responded like with a vitriolic like rant on Twitter or something. But now it's like, no, if it's like that, I just ignore it. But if I think it's got some substance, I will respond to it in some way, whether it's addressing that in podcast or adding it to the preface or just letting it feed into my work in the future. Like if I've had feedback for things that, it's better getting some negative feedback. It improves you as a journalist and writer than just someone lavishing it with like praise or something. Like good criticism is way more valuable, I think. It's
Mm,
easy to say that. It doesn't mean it doesn't sting when you get it, but it's in the long term it makes you better.
yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to end on. I'll just hold up the book again and say I highly recommend it. And
Available in all good and bad bookshops. Yeah, I'm not fussy where you purchase it from, but
I'll just give you the opportunity to say anything else that you may want to say.
no, thank you for having me on. Really value the work you do on like secularism, free thinking, and I think yeah, there is a relationship between certain like cult-like behavior we see in the manosphere and manosphere adjacent groups, and yeah, and some of the work you do with the free thinker.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and well, both for your kind words and for taking an hour and a half out of your day to
No worries.
talk to me. I appreciate it.
No worries. Have a nice weekend.
You too. You too.